some were discovered. And
well, the Earth is perfectly capable of raising outrageous hell without us triggering a nuclear war.
It doesn't even hurt, that it must be a sort of displacement.
Well,
I mean,
I'm not sure exactly. As I said, we don't know what we're for. Maybe we are a suicide machine. My faith is that we're just slow to get rolling, and that once the battle is joined, once every person on Earth realizes that we're in a battle for planetary survival, then people will get with the program. It's just that things aren't bad enough yet.
What about
There are many, many possibilities. The pressure has not yet come on. I mean, we're led by jackasses. We don't bother with our political processes, but let the pressure come on, and I think people will make greater demands of their political institutions. And the pressure is going to come on. One thing I'm confident of is things are going to get worse before they get better. I find myself in the position of sort of cheering it on, because it is going to be a forward escape. There's no going backward. Things must get worse before they get better. I remember when 3 Mile Island happened. I mean, I was, melt down. If this thing can vent a toxic cloud that makes Washington, D.C. uninhabitable, we'll get action. You want to see environmental consciousness move to the top of the agenda? Wipe out Washington, D.C. with a broken nuclear power plant, and by God, you'll see action. Well, yes, we mustn't get into these vindictive scenarios. But, it's generally credited, if you read the people involved, that really what turned things around in the Soviet Union was Chernobyl. It really was. In the minds of the leadership and the war-fighting plans, and they said, for crying out loud, this thing wasn't even a bomb. It was just a power plant, and 11 days after it partially screwed up, we're able to measure increased radiation levels over Auckland, New Zealand. One power plant. What if there had been a thermonuclear exchange, even a pissant exchange involving, say, under 100 weapons? It's off the scale. So they looked at that and they said, we're bankrupt. We've had it. Then these were the male dominators of the male dominators. I mean, if you've ever met members of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, my God, talk about people that it's hard to get a smile out of. So, what we have to do is stop looking for leadership from the top, because the least among us make their way into those positions of power. I mean, you can see that now. Those guys are not fit to throw guts down to a bear, any of them. And so, what we have to do is knock off this fantasy of being citizens inside a democratic state. I mean, what we are the propagandized masses inside a fascist dictatorship. And what people have to do is begin to form affinity groups, get their own shit together, get their own goals defined, and then move out into it and do it. It's not going to come from, the policy council of the Republican or Democratic Party. That's just silly to think that.
A lot of our girls and my friends are really that's the end of that concept. You never thought of that.
That's right. Getting to know each other. Know your enemy, and they probably will not be your enemy. We have a very weird political agenda. I mean, for instance, I don't want to get into an air-clawing rave about this, but I feel as a person who was raised Catholic that I have a certain license to criticize my own subgroup. I think that, the Third Reich was a Sunday school picnic in terms compared to the population policies of the Roman Catholic Church. They will shove millions of people per year into poverty, disease, and death in the pursuit of a theological doctrine that nobody understands the sense of. In a civilized political environment, those people would be placed under immediate arrest, just like we did the leadership of the Nazis. I do not understand how you can call yourself pro-life when the policies that you espouse mean planetary death. That's the program of the pro-life position. More starvation, more agony, more wars, more destroyed land, more toxic output in the name of being pro-life? What have words come to mean? I mean, it's really bizarre. And we, even us in this room, the thing that was so great about the 60s and that is so frustrating about the 90s is people do not get pissed off. I mean, I can tell you this and you can nod in agreement, but, at some point the thing becomes so odious, so clearly intellectually bankrupt, so clearly toxic to any kind of human values that any of us can relate to, that you just have to put yourself on the line. And I don't know when that moment will come. It's not for me to say. I guess a switch will be turned in the unconscious. But there's enough evidence of outrage and muddle-headedness and outright evil around that sooner or later we're going to have to confront it. Otherwise, this is a sinking submarine. And there is no way out unless people who really understand the gravity of the situation and the stakes make their voices heard. If we leave it up to the institutions that have been put in place over the last 500 years, these are anti-human institutions. These institutions hate the human race, hate ordinary people. And until we wake up to this, we're going to be their victims. We're the marks. Well, how do you like being a mark? You can just take so much of that, and then you just finally have to stand up and say enough, And, JP.
Demographically, Japan comes close to what you talk about. They talk about it
towards as far as the type of educational reform that this society needs.
Well, you're right. Education is the key. And, it's just my opinion on this, but history is, to not know your history is to be amnesic. I mean, if you met a person who couldn't tell you where they were from 1970 to 80, you would define them as a fairly damaged person. But how many people do you meet who can tell you where Western civilization was between 900 and 1600? People don't know. So since they don't know, they can be fed any shit that is out there, and they don't know. They have no idea. So the way to gain power is to reclaim a command of history. And then you can, like for instance, I remember when the Vietnam War was breaking out, and I was in school at the University of California at Berkeley, and the professor said, we all have to read Thucydides. We all have to read about the war against Sparta. The war against Syracuse, which was in Sicily, and how it destroyed Greek democracy, and how it allowed the ascendancy of the dictatorship of the 30. And why did this happen? Because the Athenian citizenry could not understand the war aims, because the Athenian leadership didn't understand clearly what the war aims were. All the mistakes of the Vietnam War were repeated or occurred in this war, which was fought well before the year zero. But you tell most people to read Thucydides, and they just give you a strange look. Well, it's not because we want to be obscurantists or we want to carry on conversations like Cambridge intellectuals. It's because we want to know what to do with the future. And the first thing you do with the future is you don't make the stupid mistakes that were made in the past. Like this New Age thing amazes me. I mean, there are people who call themselves spiritual thinkers who think that the spiritual quest began with Madame Blavatsky, for crying out loud. Well, I've got news for you. People have been over this ground again and again and again. It always amazes me that people will give their loyalty to a guru who is obviously, a grab tailor and a tax skate and a jerk. And you say to them, well, have you read Plato? Or have you studied Nagarjuna? Do you know what Moses Maimonides has to say about this? And say, why do you follow this guy? He probably hasn't even read these people. Do you know that there have been some fairly bright people around over the last 6,000 or 7,000 years? And yeah, they don't have a white limousine, or they won't invite you up to their place in the Hamptons or something, but they're good. And all you have to do is go to the public library and read this stuff. And people don't want that. They want flash. This very sincere people come to my workshops, and I realize that they want me to tell them this stuff. And because I guess this is better than sitting home on a Saturday afternoon and reading. But Plato said it a lot better than I'm saying it. And so did a lot of other people. Civilization is a vast storehouse of wisdom. But if you don't avail yourself of it, then you have to figure it out based on what's happened since Nixon or something. And you're not going to get very far. They trap you with that. I don't want to rave about this, but what I saw happen to my own university, I think that a conscious decision was made by the American establishment at the close of the 1960s. And what they said to themselves was, this idea of universal education and an educated citizenry, this we don't like. We see now what happens when you educate your citizens. They figure out the game, and they come to you with their plans for reform and how to make it better. So I was like among, at least at the University of California, I was among the last people to go through that university where the goal was to inform you about the nature of the enterprise called Western civilization. And after that, what they got into was this MBA, data entry, all this stuff. The universities became trade schools. And what they give you is video games. They give you TV, video games, and they give you a skill. And you say, well, now you're a level 3 data enterer, and we're gonna give you $35,000 a year, and please shut up about it. That's it. You've been brought inside, but we're not interested in your opinions. We're giving you a life, we're giving you a trade, and we'll be giving you some orders downstream, and by God, you better snap to when the moment comes. This has nothing to do with democracy. This is fascism, is what it is.
It's just like what you said. How much you earn is how much you can learn. It's the same thing.
Everything is commoditized. Everything is. They assume that you and people these days want to be secure. I don't really understand that. It's great. You need a certain critical mass to give that up. It's great when you and all your friends agree that you don't care whether you starve or not because you're going to have so much fun doing it. But it's hard to reach that place by yourself because it's not very much fun. But, it's... there is a problem in that we are manipulated and we are not empowered. And those who are empowered, it wouldn't be so bad if they had a plan. But their plan is, another house, another Mercedes, a deeper swimming pool. This is no plan. And so it's up to the creativity of ordinary people. And the strongest weapon to support and augment the creativity of ordinary people is the psychedelic experience, because it allows you to put information together in new and exciting ways. And this is to be then the basis of a new political order. It has to be. And if we don't react, then, the mushroom said to me once, it said, if you don't have a plan, you become part of somebody else's plan. Because there are only planners and plannees, So what do you want to do? You want to be part of somebody else's plan or get your own agenda together? Yeah.
How does Richard psychedelic experience at the university or any education?
Well, you stop lying about it, for openers. I deal with this with my children, we live in an area where half the population grows dope, and once a month they have anti-drug day at school, and it's just the level of cultural schizophrenia is just awesome, So I just tell my kids the truth. And I say, here's what it is. There are good drugs and bad drugs, but mostly it's the monkey doing the drugs. And, inform yourself. Ask me. If you don't believe me, all these other people, shrinks, chemists. Avail yourself. And I'm very pleased with how my kids are turning out. Other people may look upon them with horror. Because they don't take a lot of crap from anybody, but they are of good heart, and they trust themselves. Yeah.
So taking drugs in group sessions, or was they doing it while reading certain material?
Well, no. The thing to do with the drugs on that level is let's unshackle psychotherapy and stop having it be this playpen game and actually get it into play. Psychotherapists are an incipient shaman class. Obviously they aren't all, but that's the place to start. People who want to help people who have a portion of a medical education, and people who are interested in the dynamics of the mind. If we all came up through a series of initiations where, you were exposed first to this and then to that and then led on, and always educated going in and always debriefed coming out, then these things there would be no problem. We're just so weird about human nature. The sex thing has just been even mildly dealt with in the last 50 years, and we forget. People I don't know. It's just weird. People barely knew where children came from until the 20th century. Sex was very, very chancy and iffy and occasional. And you read the biographies of the people who created Western civilization, and they're mostly weirdos of some sort because they were bent by the sexual mores of the world they were living in. We have to, the problem which haunted Marxism and which destroyed it ultimately was that they had the wrong version of what a human being is. They used to talk about what was called Marxist man. Well, Marxist man is such a limited concept of what people really are that it collapsed under its own weight. On the other hand, Western man, this concept, is also a tremendously limited idea. We deny our roots in the animal body. We deny our roots in the life of the imagination. terrified of sex. You have to do it in one position, and it has to be a guy and a woman, and it has to be within the confines of marriage, and all this stuff. This is what was happening until very recently, and still goes on, believe me, with enormous vehemence in a lot of places. And now drugs. I mean, drugs clearly are about human nature, and the model of human nature which this society has deified makes it a pathological act, a sin and a crime to alter your own consciousness. This doesn't make any sense. We are at war with ourselves, and we're losing.
Why then not call psychedelic drugs? I mean, if you're saying that good drugs and bad drugs, why don't you still call something and calling it good drugs and drugs rather than subjecting that term?
Well, because I think the word drug has been pretty thoroughly corrupted by the dominator. The way you corrupt a word is you define it so broadly that it means nothing. And, drug, we're talking about everything from DMT through heroin and on to penicillin and aspirin. These are all drugs. So that's why I try to say psychedelics and insist, that these are not drugs. There's something else, yeah.
Well, I also see in the book...
And express what you're expressing here.
Well, there's real youth phobia. Youth is regarded as subversive. It's almost regarded as a standing army within society that belongs to a foreign power. The generational gap is not driven by the young, it's driven by the old who are nervous about giving up power. I mean, their attitude is, we can't trust you with the keys to the car. But the problem is, they're driving the car over the cliff at 200 miles an hour. So I don't really have an answer for this. I mean, I feel very, very fortunate in that I have very rarely and only for brief periods of time ever had to take orders from anybody. Now, in order to achieve that, I had to do a number of things that prudence dictates I not even mention here. But you have to be very suspicious. You have to keep clear. They're always trying to get you down into the hole that they're in,